Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going on an absolutely fascinating journey. We're going to start way zoomed out, looking at big picture economic theory, the grand ideas about how societies and individuals make choices. And then, we're going to trace those exact same ideas all the way down into the microscopic wiring of your very own brain. So if you've ever wondered why some tasks feel, well, literally impossible to start, or why you suddenly find the motivation to do something incredibly difficult, you are in the exact right place. We're going to decode the architecture of choice.
Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. First, we'll peel the behavior onion. Second, we'll look at the paradox of effort. Third, dopamine, specifically wanting versus liking. Fourth, we'll map the brain's decision circuitry. And finally, number 5, we'll look at what happens when motivation completely fails.
So, Section 1, peeling the behavior onion, from macro theories down to microbiology.
It all starts with a remarkably simple yet totally profound question. Why do we choose to do anything at all? Seriously, think about it. Whether it's choosing to get out of bed in the morning, deciding to invest in a stock, or just picking up a glass of water, every single action requires a choice. But how we understand the why behind that choice, well, that really depends on who you ask.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to peel back the layers of human behavior, kind of like an onion. Step 1 is the outermost layer, classical economics. This gives us these idealized, perfect mathematical models of how people should behave. But, as you know, those perfect models often fail in the real world. So we move to Step 2, behavioral economics, testing real human behavior with actual experiments. Digging a bit deeper, we hit Step 3, psychology, where we ask what mental motives are driving those behaviors. And finally, right at the absolute core, we find Step 4, neurobiology. This is where we're literally mapping the physical circuitry of the brain to see the biological roots of our decisions.
And the reason we have to drill all the way down to biology is perfectly captured right here. See, classical economists built their models on a completely fictional creature they called Homo economicus, a perfectly rational, totally predictable, emotionless calculating machine. But we are Homo sapiens. We're biological, we're highly emotional, and our preferences are constantly shifting over time. We aren't just calculators. We are living organisms shaped by evolution. So to truly understand our choices, we really need the relatively new field of neuroeconomics.
Which brings us to Section 2. The paradox of effort. Why is everything so much work? I absolutely love this quote from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland because it just beautifully captures such a universal human experience. Alice is sitting there on a hot day, sleepily debating if the pleasure of making a daisy chain would actually be worth the trouble of just getting up and picking the daisies. Effort is inherently experienced as a burden, right? We are biologically wired to avoid it. Yet paradoxically, we're also capable of expending massive amounts of effort to achieve our goals.
So, what Alice was doing in that exact moment is known in science as cost-benefit integration. It's basically this constant subconscious math your brain is running to figure out if an action is actually worth it. Optimal foraging theory tells us that all animals are wired to maximize their gains while minimizing energy expenditure. If the physical cost of getting up outweighs the joy of the daisy chain, well, you stay seated on the couch. But how exactly does your brain tip those scales?
That brings us right into Section 3, dopamine, wanting versus liking. Let's dive straight into the neurochemistry of drive.
Listen, if you take away absolutely anything from this explainer, let it be this exact distinction right here. For decades, dopamine was famously known as the pleasure chemical. But we now know that's not quite right. Liking is the actual hedonic pleasure you get from a reward, like the taste of a piece of chocolate. Astoundingly, even if you completely deplete dopamine in certain areas of a rat's brain, it still likes the chocolate. It still shows pleasure. But wanting, that actual internal drive to overcome physical costs and effort to go get the chocolate, that relies heavily on dopamine. Dopamine isn't just about enjoying the reward, it is literally the chemical fuel required to overcome the effort needed to get it. Mind-blowing, right?
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing dopamine's incredibly diverse job description. You can see vigor control here, that's what we just talked about, high effort and action. Then it acts as a teaching signal through reward prediction errors, spiking when you get an unexpected reward to help you learn. And it also signals salience, flagging biologically important events so you can form associations between your actions and their outcomes. It's just a remarkably versatile neurotransmitter.
Moving on to Section 4, the brain's decision circuitry, mapping the basal ganglia and ACC. Let's zoom in from those chemicals to the physical geography of your brain.
Welcome to the literal engine room of your motivation, the basal ganglia. I want you to focus on the two main pathways here. The direct pathway, which uses D1 dopamine receptors, is essentially your brain's green light. It's the go signal. The indirect pathway, using D2 receptors, well, that's the red light, the stop signal. So when dopamine floods this system, it basically slams the gas on D1 and cuts the brakes on D2, literally opening the gates for you to finally get off the couch and take action.
Now, tucked within this network sits the nucleus accumbens, which is split into two key parts. The core is your habit center, translating raw values into learned automatic responses. The shell, however, is a bit more primal. Fascinatingly, the shell is the only part that receives direct input from your hippocampus, which is your memory center. And this is exactly why simply walking into a familiar gym or sitting at your usual study spot can automatically trigger that biological drive to start working.
Let's move on and see how this all builds up to another absolutely crucial region, the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. For a long time, scientists actually thought the ACC had totally separate areas for thinking and feeling, but newer data reveals something way more profound. The ACC essentially acts as a massive integration hub. It physically overlaps the pain of effort, your cognitive plan, and the potential reward. If the basal ganglia is the engine, the ACC is the navigational computer deciding if the ultimate payoff is actually worth the painful fuel it takes to get there.
Finally, Section 5, when motivation fails. Let's zoom back out and look at auto-activation deficit and apathy.
Because when the circuitry we just discussed gets damaged, the results are tragic, but also incredibly revealing about human nature. The most severe form of this is auto-activation deficit, or AAD. It's characterized by an absolute inability to internally generate goal-based actions. Patients with AAD will literally sit in a room for hours, completely motionless and apathetic. It most commonly results from bilateral damage to the basal ganglia, that exact engine room of motivation we mapped out just a minute ago.
So, the crucial point here is the stark contrast between a healthy brain and one with ACD. Look at the table here. A person with ACD still has totally normal hedonic responses. If you give them a reward, they still feel pleasure. They still like things. Their motor execution is totally fine too. If you explicitly instruct them to move, they can move perfectly. What is completely shattered is that middle wanting column. Without an external prompt, the biological bridge between desiring a reward and generating the effort to go get it is just gone. Which leaves us with this final, somewhat provocative question to wrap up our explainer today. When you push through a tough workout, or you force yourself to study, or you simply decide to get out of bed in the morning, is your choice to expend that effort driven by your own conscious free will, or is it ultimately dictated by the precise microscopic dopamine pathways firing deep within the ancient circuitry of your basal ganglia? It's a question that totally blurs the line between economics, psychology, and biology. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.
Wow, we're already at the end of the video. Come on, watch other fun videos too, and don't forget to click subscribe to the BrainBubble channel.